G'day guys and gal, Warhammer 40k is a lot of things. A grimdark sci-fi setting, an adventurous tale of heroes rage against the dying light, a pew-pew skia bappity bap. But above all these, it's a tragedy. Through poor decisions and malicious schemes, a setting that could have been noble, bright and glorious is now shit for everyone, and nothing embodies this more than the Mournival, who can be seen as a metaphor for the entire setting. A group of battle brothers that were as close as humans could possibly be, who all wanted the best for each other, their Primarch and their Legion, and who all suffered extremely grim and tragic fates, often with a lot of irony thrown in, and I think that's worth talking about. Before we get started, I was at this hectic hardstyle event on Friday and I bumped into a few of you guys, including a man called Pat, who was this hectically jacked Asian. Pat asked for a shout out, so here you go Pat, just remember to turn off your high beams next time. It's always awesome seeing you guys out and about, and I love it when you say g'day, so if you ever see me out in the wild then feel free to come on over, especially if I'm chatting to a hot chick because then she'll think I'm special. But then I'll have to explain to her that I'm famous for talking about the backstory of little plastic toys killing each other. Worth it. In other news, the first major mini launch in over 6 months is going live this Friday. I have a surgery tomorrow, which means no video on Wednesday, but you should still totally subscribe. The closer to 600k we get, the better I'll feel during surgery recovery, and I've got some hectic shit in store for when we clock that milestone. So yeah, give that button a slap. Today we'll go over the Mournival and its tragic fate, detailing each of its members and their horrific demises, as well as looking at the metaphor regarding what the Mournival represented, because I'm deep like that. Let's get into it. Firstly, we need to figure out what the fuck a Mournival actually is. In the Lunar Wolves Legion, Horus chose a small group of his most trusted Astartes to act as advisors. He deliberately made them as diverse and different as possible so that they could offer a wide range of opinions, at least that is what it appeared to be. In reality, the Mournival was a bit of an ego booster for Horus. He would use them to create mock debates in front of other people in order to boost Horus's own opinion and stress test it against controlled scrutiny. It was one of the early examples of Horus's ego, control freak tendencies and manipulation. However, not to sound too cynical, Horus did actually respect his Mournival and would listen to what they had to say as well. If you've read the early Horus Heresy books where the Mournival is bantering and joking around, it is really quite startling to see how it all ends up. Abaddon being this gruff and brutish warrior that also had a softer and extremely honourable side, turning into what he is today. The great banter they shared eventually turning into bloodshed. As for the history of the Mournival, the lore isn't consistent on its age, with it being stated to be around 200 years old and founded at the start of the Great Crusade, whilst it was also stated to be an offshoot of the Warrior Lodge, which was only 60 years old. I'm more inclined to say it's 200 years old, as it has had quite a fair few members, all of which needed to die in order to allow a new member to join. I mean, there seems to have been around 6 members that joined and died before Abaddon was a part of it. From there, more would die until the Mournival composed of Abaddon, Little Horus, Tarek, and Hasta Sejanus. Now I do need to shout out Sejanus here, as he was literally considered to be the perfect space marine. Everyone liked him, like fucking everyone from all legions. He was a total dude bro and easily Horus's favourite, so of course he died in an extremely unceremonious way as he was ambushed during a diplomatic mission and cut down like a dog. Horus tore this treacherous civilization a new asshole before Garviel Loken, who proved himself in the battle during this campaign, was chosen as Sejanus' replacement. That gives us our main Mournival that would represent the heresy going forward. The big scary but honourable Abaddon, the pragmatic and insightful little Horus, the bantery big brother Tarek Torgadon, and the humanised, empathetic and unshakably loyal Garviel Loken. This Mournival would work great together, fighting hard alongside their Primarch, advising him, playing his little show game. But everything ate total shit when Horus was stabbed with a spicy knife and begun dying. It was up to the Mournival to decide what to do. Either they could hand him over to a bunch of witch cultists who promised to save his life, or they could stay true to the Imperial truth and the Emperor's word and let nature run its course. Abaddon and little Horus were desperate, so they went ahead and gave Horus to the cult, and they did bring Horus back to life, but it wasn't really Horus anymore. This Horus was a dark version of himself, his insecurities replaced with a massive ego and a desire to burn the galaxy to the ground and rule over the ashes. Garviel immediately noticed the difference and was shocked at how callous and ruthless his previously caring and warm-hearted Primarch had become. The split decision of how to deal with him as he was dying had also ruined the Mournival. Abaddon and little Horus were fuming at Tarek and Loken for being willing to let Horus die, whilst Tarek and Loken were pissed that the other side of the Mournival had abandoned the Imperial truth and used some dark voodoo to bring back their dad as a turbo asshole. Horus also no longer gave a fuck about anyone's advice, nor gave a fuck about putting on a show for others. He would just say what everyone was doing and that was that. So now all the Mournival did was stand there like some kind of honor guard or whatnot. Then there was Isstvan 3, where Tarek and Loken were sent to the surface of a doomed world in order to be wiped out via virus bombing by order of their own Primarch. They would go on to survive this due to the heroics of Saul Tarvitz, the most awesome motherfucker to ever live, but it's also here that the fate of the Mournival would be sealed. In the final battle of Isstvan 3, Tarek and Loken sought out little Horus and Abaddon, and they actually found them, engaging in a duel. To everyone's amazement, Loken actually got the upper hand on Abaddon and used his own Terminator bulk against him. However, Tarek was the inferior warrior to little Horus and was decapitated. This fucked Loken up bad, and the subsequent 2v1 left him wounded and on the ground. Abaddon would make the mistake of leaving him to succumb to his wounds, something that Loken refused to do, as he would go on to survive his injury and the second wave of virus bombs. Don't ask me how, nobody knows. The metaphor behind this is simple. The Mournival was a band of brothers closer than most others. However, half of them were loyal to the Emperor and half were loyal to their Legion and Primarch, an exact representation of the Horus heresy itself, with Loken and Tarek being the loyalist Primarchs and Abaddon and Little Horus being the traitors. You can also look at some deeper parallels here, like Ferrus Manus' death, that being the first blood drawn of the heresy being via decapitation, exactly like Tarek's death, who was the first of the Mournival to die in the heresy, also to decapitation. To make matters worse for poor Tarek, his corpse was used to summon a fucked up demon called Tormageddon, the result of which also brought Tarek's spirit back up from the warp, who would then go on to spend some time hanging out with Loken and also acting like a bit of a dead therapist to him. As for the Mournival itself, the ever-pragmatic little Horus wished to bring it back, so he and Abaddon picked two new members, Falcus Kaiba and Grail Noctua, but these guys were brutes and idiots, chosen because Abaddon and Little Horus liked them but didn't really respect them. It was all superficial and a pale shadow of what the Mournival used to be. It also didn't last super long, as Grail Noctua got his ass murdered by someone way doper than he, with Falcus Kaiba getting cut in half during the Siege of Terra, also by someone a lot cooler. Tormageddon would ironically be briefly added to the Mournival after Grail's death, sort of bringing Tarek back on in a significantly more shitheady format. Garviel would finally give his old friend the rest he deserved by slaying Tormageddon during the Siege of Terra. This just leaves Garviel, Abaddon and Little Horus still kicking. But not for long. Little Horus and Garviel would come face to face. At this point, Little Horus was a diminished version of what he was. Ever since Isstvan, he had been hearing this slow breathing in his mind, as well as hallucinations of Loken. He felt extremely guilty about what had happened and his role in things, so he could never relax into his new reality like Abaddon did. When he finally came face to face with Loken, he thought it was a hallucination until he was struck and wounded. Little Horus was then extremely violently killed by Loken, who performed a hectic fatality on him, avenging Tarek. Loken would play a key role in taking out Horus and saving the Emperor, as it was Horus's love of Loken that made him realize that he was a giant piece of shit and that destroying the galaxy in the name of dark thirsting gods was actually a pretty retarded idea. When Horus was slain, Loken stayed by his side as the loyalists withdrew. He was eventually surrounded by traitor sons of Horus, but Abaddon was so sick of all the death and fighting, especially amongst his own brothers, that he allowed Loken to leave freely and unchallenged. In return, Loken said he could negotiate their surrender to the loyalists. Neither side agreed, so Loken prepared to leave. Until Erebus out of nowhere just shanks Loken and murders him in an act of cold blood, an act that reverberated through the warp due to how bullshit it was, spawning the demon Samus, who would then go back in time and help kick off the chain of events that caused the heresy in the first place. Abaddon stood there stunned, now the only member of the Mournival to still live. A brotherhood that was now ended, something that should have been completely unbreakable was now shattered. The most tragic part of all of it is that those that died probably shared a better fate than Abaddon, who now could never know peace as he constantly wages an eternal war against the Imperium with no true brothers left by his side. I mean, you could argue Falcus Kaiba is still around since he got possessed and is now a half demon, but Kaiba was already a bit of an NPC when we first met him, and death and resurrection hasn't exactly made him much more interesting. The saddest part of all this is that I feel like if Sejanus was never sent on that diplomatic mission and killed, the heresy could have been avoided. He was that much of a stand-up guy that I genuinely believe that him saying to Horus, "Yo bro, fuck that traitor noise, let's be loyal," and then Horus would have been like, "Damn dude, you right, my bad homie." Either way, the Mournival ate turbo shit and the galaxy burned. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then check out the Patreon or the major minis, or just subscribe. 600k is on the horizon, and so are all the goodies that come along with it. Join the Discord for more memes, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.